on the measures we announced 2 weeks ago, the United States is imposing new sanctions in key sectors of the Russian economy: energy, arms, and finance. No, it's not a new Cold War. What it is a very specific issue related to Russia's unwillingness to recognize that Ukraine can chart its own path. And I think that if you listen to President Poroshenko, if you listen to the Ukrainian people, they've consistently said they seek good relations with Russia.
President Obama announcing new sanctions by the U.S., also talking about new sanctions from the EU. That is significant on Russia. This, of course, after the downing of that Malaysian flight, the firing of Russian military into Ukrainian territory, as well as all of the actions by Vladimir Putin. Take a look at the latest polls. Who has the upper hand in this situation? Vladimir Putin, 75%, according to the latest polls. A Pew poll, how important to U.S. interests is what happens between Russia and Ukraine? Very important. 48%, somewhat important, 35%. You can see the rest. We're back with the panel. Juan, is it enough? The president said this is not a new Cold War. Is Putin getting the message?
Obviously not. Obviously, what you've seen in the recent days is a buildup of Russian forces on the Ukrainian border. You've also seen the persistence, which is I find it just alarming in terms of the rebels, the Russian-backed rebels, shooting down aircraft flying over the Ukraine. So he has not gotten the message, and the question now is whether these sanctions, especially the ones coming from Europe, which does a higher level of trade with Russia than the United States does, could have some real impact on the people who've been backing Putin, his political backing at home, and whether it would change opinions at home. You know, Putin has benefited greatly in the polling in terms of his popularity at home from nationalists who see him as sort of, you know, putting the roar back in the bear.
AB.
Yeah, he's up to 86% as of last week, 20% higher than when he went into Crimea.
Putin in Russia.
Yeah, look, I think it was what had to be done. Putin's goal is to crush NATO and divide the EU. Both are frail. He would like to get into our relationship, our alliances with European nations. There are a pass in these sanctions for the French, for the British, and for the Germans. So, but they are far further than they've been willing to go before. If it wasn't going to inflict pain, he wouldn't have been on the phone with President Obama on July 17th, crying about the couple of names that Obama was doing, adding to a list unilaterally to freeze assets or whatever. It is going to be a problem. But whether he meets his goals of redrawing the map of Europe and continues on to try to crush NATO and everything else, at this point, he's pledging to do so.
The president was asked today, Charles, this about lethal weapons and the possibility of moving those into the Ukrainians. Take a listen.
The issue at this point is not the Ukrainian capacity to outfight separatists. They are better armed than the separatists. The issue is how do we prevent bloodshed in eastern Ukraine. We're trying to avoid that. The combination of stronger U.S. and European sanctions is going to have a greater impact on the Russian economy than we've seen so far. Obviously, we can't, in the end, make President Putin see more clearly. Ultimately, that's something that President Putin has to do on his own.
So he didn't really answer the question about lethal arms. We're getting word from Capitol Hill and our producer up there that at a closed-door Senate Armed Services Committee briefing tomorrow, the administration may signal its willingness to provide small arms to the Ukrainians. What about this?
Well, it's very important. I think when the president says the issue is not Ukrainian capacity to outfight the separatists, that is the issue. What's happening right now, the most important event right now is the fact that the Ukrainian army, remarkably, having taken the rebel stronghold of Slavyansk last month, is now closing in on its new capital, Donetsk, attacking from the north and south, and looking to cut it off from the rest of the rebel area and from the Russian frontier, which is the source of its supplies and many of its fighters. And that's where the action is. So when the president says it doesn't really matter, that's the thing that would push Putin either to retreat and to give up and to settle politically, or to double down and invade. Of course we ought to be helping the rebels, and I think it's a failing of this administration.